We are back with another episode of the Sky Society podcast. And today I'm thrilled to be chatting with Erin Smith. She is the Creator Partnerships Manager at IPSY. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to chat with you as well. So we're going to dive into your entire career journey from starting at Endeavor to going over to IPSY and how you've leveraged relationships and networking throughout your career to get you to where you are now. But before we dive into all of that fun stuff, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Awesome. So, hello again. My name is Erin Smith. I love to say that I'm a California native with a New York work ethic. Or is that what I say? I said, yeah,
Yes,
California
yes. I
working.
saw that and I loved that.
I feel like that sums me up in a nutshell in terms of I try to really bring the positive energy and spirit to wherever my career takes me, but I'm also a hard worker, which I definitely think those two aspects have gone hand in hand with my career journey and just the relationships I've built along the way. I am coming on almost, I think it's 5.5 years in influencer marketing, which is crazy
Oh
because
my gosh.
when I was a senior in college, I think it was just kind of, we were still referring to them as bloggers, not necessarily influencers or
Oh my
creators.
gosh.
So it does make me feel a bit old, but it's crazy to think that I've been in this industry for what feels like a long time, but it's also just the beginning.
Yes. And I mean, even in the time that you've been in it, it has changed so much. That's also where my first marketing internship was at influencer marketing too. And it was all about YouTube then. And so like now it's also like interesting to see how much like the platforms have shifted and there's been a lot of growth and change.
Definitely.
But one thing, so we're both from Southern California and you also graduated from USD, yes?
Yes, I did. I'm a torero.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny like being in Austin now every time someone's like, "Oh, where'd you graduate?" and I'm like, "Oh, USD." They're like, "Oh, USC, oh, UCSD, oh, SDSU." Like no one knows that USD. Is it the same with you
Yeah,
or
same. We're like, oh, go Trojans. I'm like,
like
no, like
no,
San
no.
Diego. Oh, UCSD, SDSU. I'm like,
No.
no. I always say we need to do a better job of putting it on the map.
I know. I think the one notable thing I would like to say is while I was there, we were voted most beautiful campus, and but and honestly, the business school too is like ranked in the top 100. But
It
it
is.
it's
It's
just that yeah, everyone just confuses it with someone else, and I've honestly stopped correcting people. Like now, anytime someone just assumes I went to somewhere else, I just am like, yeah, just too much effort.
oh my gosh, I know. It's such a tragedy.
Yes. So, did you have any intentions on staying in San Diego, or did you know that you wanted to go back to LA?
So I knew I didn't want to stay in San Diego. What's so great about San Diego and going to school there is that I felt as if I did a lot of San Diego when I was there for school in 4 years. So Mission Beach, Pacific Beach, downtown. I really felt that I did it all. And growing up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, I also was ready for something bigger and I really wanted to put myself out there and spread my wings. So I think around the beginning of my senior year in college, I knew I wanted to go to New York. So I when I was looking for jobs, I was pretty much focused on New York City as I headed into my senior year.
And is that where Endeavor was when you went to Endeavor?
It was. So I actually interned for them heading into my senior year, and I was in their Beverly Hills office. And I was actually in their, they own a number of different companies under the Endeavor umbrella, one of them being IMG College. So I was in their sports marketing department as an intern. So looking for brand deals for big schools such as UCLA, that was like one of the schools I worked on and finding big brand partners to be a school sponsor for their sports teams. So that's what I did in Beverly Hills as an intern. It was such a great experience. I made so many good connections, but I knew maybe because we didn't go to a huge sports school, I didn't have such a big passion for college sports. And the company had so many different avenues of different career paths. So during that time, I networked a lot. And then as spring came around my senior year, I started reaching out to their HR in New York, asking about job opportunities in New York City. So I believe it was around August, not until August after I graduated in 2017 is when there was an opportunity and I began interviewing, and it ended up starting after Labor Day weekend.
Insane. That's
Ah,
amazing. So you're able to kind of make that move to New York happen. I
but
also had dreams of going to college in New York, but it has yet to it did not happen, obviously, me going to San Diego, but I feel like there's something so glamorous and about going to New York. But before we jump over to your experience at Endeavor, while you were in college, you did like a lot of internships. You had 3 really awesome marketing internships. How were you able to get any, or do you have any advice for women who are looking for marketing internships in college?
definitely. So I want to say, I think my very first one was Everyday California. And if you're from San Diego or went to school in San Diego, you may have heard of it. It's kind of a mom and pop, at least when I was there, like enough like a clothing brand, but they also did tours in the La Jolla shores, like kayaking, snorkeling tours. And I was pretty much their social media intern. And I met them actually at the career fair. I was just walking around. I remember at the time I was a sophomore, and the most people were really only interested in talking to juniors or seniors, but I just struck up a conversation, and they were just looking for someone to kind of just do some odds and ends. So I ended up interning for them. It was unpaid, but it was just maybe like twice a week I would go in and like help with inventory, or maybe mail things out to people who were bloggers at the time, or someone who they thought was a brand fit, finding college ambassadors for them. So that was just something. It honestly wasn't a heavy lift, but it was just good experience. And it was such a small company to kind of get your hands dirty in so many different places. So I would say, as I'm sure college students hear this all the time about going to the career fairs. I had no idea who Everyday California was. I didn't even know they were going to be there. But I think if you're just open to having the conversation, it's okay. Also, it's okay to get rejected. I feel like no one ever wants to hear that professionally or personally, but you won't know if you don't try and you don't have that conversation. So if you go and maybe it's a company you were really excited to talk to, but then maybe the conversation didn't have the opportunities you wanted, or was maybe a bit disappointing, that's okay. Like, you would never know if you didn't even put yourself out there and just strike up a conversation, ask a question, because you never know, maybe they don't have a job for you, but they also might know that one person might be like, oh, well, I have a friend at this company, like I'll connect you on LinkedIn to blah blah blah, and maybe they have this role or they're offering internships right now.
Yeah, so you never know where any of those conversations could lead you. Like you may go in thinking one thing and like something else might happen. Or I always love to say it's like creating opportunities to be lucky. It's like you're not going to get an opportunity if you just don't go, but if you go to the event, you at least are going to be putting yourself in a position to receive luck.
Totally.
All right. So you were able to get these 3 internships. I'm sure your experience like built and it allowed you, help you get each other one. And then you ended up interning at Endeavor and you moved to their New York office. So what was that like going from San Diego to New York? Because I'm sure that was an insane change.
It was a big change. I think it was one of those changes that you're never really prepared for. Obviously, college prepares you for the type of work you'll be doing and how to be professional in work environments and how to do your day-to-day job. But I don't think you're never really prepared for the culture shock necessarily going from San Diego to New York. In some ways, I don't think I could have picked almost two more polar opposite places. From San Diego, as you know, is so relaxed. People might take a surf break for their lunch, whereas New York is definitely very go, go, go. I was working long hours, not going to sugarcoat it. It was rough, and it was definitely a hard transition. I didn't think, I was expecting maybe like 9 to 5, 9 to 6, but I was definitely a lot of days working 9 to 9, or then I would go home. And I remember like the next day I would have to send out, we called it the daily monitoring report. And it was a list of all competitor news for one of the clients I worked on, and it had to be sent out by 8:30 a.m. So I would go home after a long day and then write up that report, and then wake up early in the morning, check to make sure no news ran overnight, and then send it out. So it was a hustle and definitely a grind. A lot of people can think this industry seems so glamorous and lots of cool perks, but I think one thing a lot of people don't necessarily realize is a lot of the dirty work behind the scenes. And I'm thankful for the experience because it's definitely made me a hard worker and who I am today. But you're hustling. So I think
Yeah.
honestly, it was a bit of the culture shock of New Yorkers just being a bit tougher, not necessarily going to sugarcoat things like they would in Los Angeles or maybe San Diego, but also just the constant, you're under a lot of deadlines, and it's also the nature of the entertainment industry. You're constantly on the move. There's and client services as well, there's always something new popping up. They want your feedback or opinion on something. So also not just being reactive, but also, or sorry, not just being proactive, but you have to be very reactive to constant changes in the industry your clients in, but also the overall entertainment industry.
Yes, I can only imagine that shifts just being huge for you, especially just like jump in right in after college. And at this position that you got to work on some really cool or with some really cool brands. You got to work with Michelob Ultra, Reebok, E&J Gallo Wines, Amazon Books, New York Fashion Week. So you worked with a lot of really cool companies. What were some of the like biggest things that you learned during your time there?
Oh, that is a good question. So I think when earlier on when I learned to speak up, at the time when I started, I was doing public relations and half influencer marketing. And after maybe a year, I realized traditional public relations. So researching media contacts, pitching them. Um, I realized that necessarily wasn't a passion point of mine. So it took me a while to speak up that it was something I wasn't enjoying. And then it really just came down to a conversation with the manager of sharing that I really enjoyed the influencer marketing talent side of the work I was doing, but I really did not enjoy the traditional PR. And that's something I wish I had spoken up sooner about, because no one can read your mind. If you go in with a good attitude, which everyone should, but that also might make it harder for them to realize if you don't like something you're working on. So I think one thing I learned, and that once I realized it, I made an effort to do it more often, was speak up. If you enjoy working on something, let it be known so you have more opportunities to work on projects you actually enjoy. And if it's something you really don't enjoy, if you can, finish the job through and through, but maybe at the end, talk to your manager, speak up, being like, hey, this was a great opportunity. However, in the future, I'd rather spend my time focusing on maybe something in fashion or something that's more talent facing, rather than like cold calling or cold pitching a bunch of editors, getting no responses, because your time is valuable. So make sure you're speaking up and doing what you want. And another thing, and it's something I always struggle with, but is setting boundaries. I'm someone who I'd rather work and get the job done than tell myself to stop and wait till the next day. But you have to set boundaries, because if you're not taking care of yourself, not only are you going to suffer, but your work's going to suffer. And I think it's so important. I know I should be taking my own advice, but really setting boundaries, especially in an industry that's nonstop, is so important.
Yes. And I think sometimes it takes like not setting boundaries for a while and feeling the burnout and then saying like, okay, I need to say no to more things, because especially when you're someone that is a hard worker and likes, to do things well, likes to perform at a high level. And there's so much opportunity to do that in an environment like the one that you're in. It's hard to say no. And it's hard to say, okay, or even to figure out what your limit is, like how much is too much, especially when I know when I was starting out, I was still in school actually while I was working. And so I would just like be in class, because USD has attendance policies, so you got to show up to class, but I'd just be like on my laptop doing work, because there was just always something to do. I wasn't able to like set that boundary for myself. And like looking back, it's like, oh, I'm allowed to say no.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so you were there for 3 years before you moved over to IPSY, where you are now, and you are currently the creator partnerships manager at IPSY. So tell me about what your role looks like now.
Yeah, so it's very different now being on the brand side. Before, I was on the client side, so I was reporting into a number of clients at a time, working on their ambassador programs, whereas now I'm pretty much the client and I almost get to report into myself. we don't have an agency partner. We do it all in-house. So my job really spans from almost researching, or if you want to say scouting, the influencers, the creators of who I want to work with, reaching out to them, negotiating their deliverables, what I would like to contract them for, briefing them, and then working with them through the approval and execution of their content. So there's many steps involved in the Creator Partnerships program at IPSY. And then also, of course, the recapping, analyzing the results, and also working with lots of different cross-functional partners, such as our social team, if they want to do a collaboration post with the creator, or maybe our lifecycle marketing team, if they want to use it in other marketing ways internally. And then we also work with our growth team. So they might take the creator's content and then use it to run ads to help that you'll see on your Instagram account later, probably from listening to me talk about it. But you'll get a targeted ad. And then if you click it, it will encourage you to subscribe, and how we're using that content in so many different ways. So it's been really interesting and exciting. There's so many different ways of working with creators. And also, as I'm sure you know, with social media, with what's going on with Meta, the Twitter and TikTok taking over, you're constantly on your toes of like, what platform do I want to invest in next? Like, who am I hiring for? Where are they going to post for 2023? And trying to understand the trends and making sure you're ahead of them, because you don't really know where the social media landscape is really headed.
Yes, it's a lot. It's so much within influencer marketing. I would be curious to know, I mean, there's so many questions that I am like thinking of, because this is just such a fun topic, but what are some things that you look for in influencers that make them good collaborations, aside from just like having a lot of followers or having a lot of likes? Like, what are some of the qualities you look for in influencers?
So one thing is definitely quality of content. I think I was talking to someone and we were saying one day there's probably going to be maybe more influencers than non-influencers, just at the
Yeah,
rate.
I mean, everyone's an influencer now, pretty much.
Exactly. We're all influential in our own ways, but so I think it's important because there's a lot of people creating content, but it's not necessarily maybe that high quality. Maybe it's not their own. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from memes. I think memes are hilarious, but sometimes a meme is just copy and pasted of an image with a different blurb. It's not that necessarily like some super creative, high quality asset. Whereas I feel like it's almost the same thing. I don't want to hire someone who's just copying someone else or creating a low quality video. So quality is really important. Also, engagement, which I think we see a lot with the smaller influencers that we call our micro and nano influencers. So usually under 10,000 followers. And that's usually because they're specialized with a certain niche. So their audience that's following them usually has a high interest in what they're creating. So let's say someone who creates this is a good example. So someone who creates content and they have textured hair, most likely they're not having a ton of people following their content if they have textured hair, because it's not everyone can relate. However, they probably have a niche audience for others who are following them with textured hair, because they want the tips. They want to know what products maybe work specifically on them that they can't just go to Target and buy because of their hair. And it's not someone necessarily, let's take like a Megan Trainor could post about, because her range of audience is so large. And also when you have a celebrity promoting a product, it might be harder for people to relate, because like, oh, they're just doing it for the money, or oh, it's their friend's brand, of course they're going to promote it. You never know. So I think also finding more niche content creators who can speak to a very specific topic is also really important. And then usually they have a higher engagement rate. So people who are liking, commenting, responding to their posts. And then that usually also, when you see higher engagement rate, you do see sometimes a higher return on your investment in terms of people who will actually go ahead and then make a purchase.
Yeah, so those niche content creators are more impactful because their audience typically, I feel like, more engaged to, and it's not like huge, right? I see Megan Trainor. I mean, I love Megan Trainor, but I don't know if I would buy a hair product that Megan Trainor would recommend to me. Whereas I would likely be more interested in
insert any celebrity.
yeah.
Really, it's hard when it's like, whoa, do you really use that, I don't know, let's say Pantene with like your hair when you have like teen hairstylists who probably spend hours working on your curls today? Like, was it really Pantene? So just like
Yeah.
examples like that. So yeah, high quality, niche content. I also think just work ethic too. A lot of the times you do see sometimes, I feel like more recently, a sense of almost entitlement around among some creators. Maybe it's because they're younger, they're new to the space, but I think work ethic is really important too. If I work with someone and maybe their content was great, but I had to follow up multiple times or they did something incorrectly, I think we give a lot of creative freedom at IPSY, so it's really hard to mess up your work. But if it's someone who really is just unprofessional, or it took me really hunting them down to get the content over the finish line, that's another thing that's probably gonna hurt their reputation. I think it's really important at the end of the day. Everyone wants to continue building relationships, but if it's you, or maybe if they have a manager or someone on their team who's not representing them to their best ability, that's also gonna that can be detrimental to their future working with a brand. So I think work ethic is something that a lot of people forget about because sometimes they're just focused on the results. But if you're going to make my job really difficult when it shouldn't be, we're in this together, we're collaborating for the brand, then that's definitely something I'm going to reconsider next time I go to hire you.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I definitely one that I think is often forgotten. But ideally, you want to work with the creator multiple times and build a
Right.
long-term relationship, and not just have it be a one-off transaction. And then knowing that you can trust them to get the job done right and efficiently is so important in that.
Exactly.
All right, so you are doing incredible things with influencers and partnerships over here at IPSY, which is all very exciting. But to get here, something that you mentioned that you're really passionate about is building meaningful relationships. So can you share maybe how you were able to build relationships that led to these career jumps for you?
Definitely. So I would probably start with it goes way back, one of my internships probably at Nestle. I was going into my junior year of college. It was such a good experience, but during that internship I definitely had some free time. So to kind of help my days go faster, no one likes to sit around and just wait for 5 o'clock to hit and go home. I asked to help with some additional projects. So I did ask someone who was considering a partnership with an NBA team for one of their brands. I offered to just do some research, nothing that really required too much additional skill, just, Google research on potential partnerships, demographics of this brand with this team. And that was super helpful to them. So then, and when I was talking to them at the time, I was saying how I really love my experience at Nestle, but I always really considered going more into the entertainment sports world. That's just something that had always interested me. So then they actually connected me to one of their contacts who at the time was at IMG College. So the following summer, that person I was helping at Nestle had connected me to my boss at IMG College. So that's kind of how that was like the first connection bridge.
Got
And
it.
then I interned for my first boss at Endeavor, and I really enjoyed it. I explained that I love the company, but I wasn't necessarily sure I want to stay in college sports. I'm very interested in moving to New York and having a career there. So he was so helpful. And when it came to applying for jobs in New York, he made sure I was connected with HR. He advocated for me. So then I ended up getting the job in New York with Endeavor. And then I was there for almost 4 years. And when I left, I ended up actually going to IPSY, and one of my managers who I had worked with at Endeavor was the one who reached out to me to take the job at IPSY. So it's so funny because all of the jobs since my internship at Nestle have all been through a connection. So I think it's so important to not just to also, and thinking of this is when you have your network, I think a lot of people forget, like, don't just tap your network when you need something or when you want a new job or you need a letter of recommendation. Keep in touch with your network when things are going great for you. Even if you're like, hey, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, like, what are you doing for the holidays? Or, hey, I just got to work on this project. Like, thanks again for thinking of me for this job. Like, I'm having such a great time. Like, let them know the positives, because I think we can all admit nothing is more annoying when you haven't talked to someone in years. You get a message from them on LinkedIn, like, hey, I'm actually looking for a new job. What you do looks cool. Like, can you connect me to HR? Like, that's the worst. Like, you
Yeah,
just,
you feel used. Yeah.
so I think it's, even if you've built these connections, I think it's so important to also take those connections and stay in touch with people, not just when something's really good. Maybe it's just like a happy birthday, or, oh, I saw you just hit like a 5-year work anniversary here. That's so amazing. Like, hope all is well. Like, how's your family? I saw your kid just turned 3. Just like the little things really go such a long way. And I think that's so important. So having those connections and really nurturing them and building them over time, you never know how far they'll go. Or also, in this industry, it's small. So I've definitely run back in circles with people who I used to work with, who I thought, oh, I'll never see them again. Oh, well, here we are again, looping back on an email chain with them. So it's also important to, like, if you have a bad experience somewhere, never burn your bridges, because this circle is so small that you're going to run into people again. So I think it's so important to, someone told me before, like, your network is your net worth. And I think it's so true. But at the same time, you also have to, I read something where it's like, character will get you in the door, but like, your work ethic is what's going to keep you and help you grow. So that's another thing too. Like, you can have a strong network, but you also have to put in the work, because if you don't put in the work, then those connections are probably not going to want to bring you with them everywhere they go.
Yes, absolutely. And Erin, I love what you said about those examples on how to maintain those relationships when you're not asking for something, because I think that's so important. And I've had people ask me, like, oh, I made this connection. Like, how do I keep, almost like keeping a lead warm, essentially, right? Like, you want to be talking to them even when you don't need something from them. And those examples you gave were all great, of like, on LinkedIn, it lets you know when people have work anniversaries, or
Yeah,
if they do a post on LinkedIn, like, comment on their post and like, on about whatever it is, or even sending those messages around the holidays. Like, right now, I think it's Thanksgiving when we're recording this, will be like New Year's when this gets released. But this is like a good time to, like, thankful to, to have you, in my, as a connection or
exactly.
whatever. Like, those are so, so important. So that way, when it comes to you, if you do need to ask for something, it's not out of the blue.
Exactly.
Yeah, so important. Okay. All right, Erin. Oh gosh, we've covered so much. Like, we did career, we did relationships, we did influencer marketing. Do you have any other advice for women in marketing who are looking to have a career trajectory like yours?
Let's see. We covered relationships are so important. Network is your net worth. I know I said that. Um, Also, just don't be afraid to ask to help. I think when I was at Endeavor, at one point, I was very interested in working in the fashion space, because they also own IMG models in New York Fashion Week. That was something I was so interested in. And I just kept offering and raising my hand, even though my schedule was booked and I really did not have the time to do more. I just was like, I don't care what it is. Like, I'll do it. If I have to follow someone around and like hold their bag, or if I need to hold an umbrella for talent to get to their seat at New York Fashion Week, whatever it is, I want to help. So, because a lot of these jobs, they want experience. And it's really hard to have experience when you're just graduating college, because you were most likely a full-time student. So when you do have the opportunities to raise your hands, even maybe if it's working on a weekend, giving up like your Saturday brunch, or like skipping drinks with your friends, but you have the opportunity to help in an area you're super passionate about, no matter how mundane it is, volunteer, because that's what's going to help you. Even if you were in an interview and you're like, I haven't done this, but I did work Fashion Week and I worked the check-in, or I did help XYZ. Like, I made sure they got to their seats, and then I made sure they posted their content for this brand partner of the fashion show. And then I made sure everyone was paid on time. Like, those tasks might seem small, but in the big picture, you helped execute something important, something that met an overall KPI. So always raise your hand if it's something you really want to do, because it's rare it's just going to be brought to you unless you're going to be persistent about making sure your voice is heard, that you want to work on a project and that you're willing to give your time. So I think it can be really tough and competitive in some of these industries. So I would just say raise your hand when you can. And if someone says no, don't take it personally. There's going to be another opportunity.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Erin. Well, where can our audience find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yes, I want to say I'm always happy to chat. There's so many people that helped me get to where I am and network in this industry that can be so overwhelming at times. So I'm always happy to chat or give advice. I'm on LinkedIn, Erin Smith. I went to the University of San Diego and I work for IPSY, which is IPSY. I know Erin Smith's such a common name, so I just want to provide
Like
information.
thousands will show up, but I promise I'm
Yeah.
one of them.
And then I'll also, I'm happy to share my email with you. So if anyone reaches out through Sky Society, you are welcome to share my contact information with them as well.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciate that. We covered so much and it was so much fun chatting with you. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I had such a great time and I can't wait to watch more of these episodes.